It's a small little activity which all of you have to do right now. Find out, okay, I'll just give Anna, find out which organism causes cholera. Bhavya, find it for typhoid. Priscilla, find it for polio. Unmana, find it for meningitis.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What should we find out? I mean, typhoid, what should I find out about typhoid?
Find out what causes typhoid.
Okay, ma'am.
And don't write just one sentence, write these things in your chat and then send it in the chat. You know, what are the reasons? Scientific name of the organism. And what is the, you know, if it is communicable, what is the source basically? Yeah.
Cholera is a disease, actually a diarrheal disease.
Mm-hmm.
It is caused when somebody is ill and has very poor hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
It is contaminated when somebody it is contaminated due to water and food.
Okay, so basically, you know, now that we are discussing cholera, you may all want to write it down. So it is basically contaminated food and water. It spreads through contaminated food and water. Cholera, right? Okay, what else? So it's basically what you're saying is that it is a kind of loose motion which causes irritation in the stomach and people pass out loosies. Okay, all right.
And
So,
the scientific name is Vibrio chloride bacteria.
Anna, is cholera treatable?
Yes.
How?
Well, if they are given proper medication and if they still if they maintain hygiene, they may get better.
Correct. So basically, as I said, you know, the answer, the first and foremost is that because of ORS, because there is so much of fluid loss which has happened from the body. If somebody passes loosies, can you believe the amount of water that goes out from the body? That needs to be replenished, that needs to be given back to the body. So nothing but just salt and sugar water solution needs to be provided. There's nothing in particular, there's no such medication as such, right? But there's a lot of, you know, fluid that needs to be given. That's one of the most important thing for cholera, right? It is caused by this bacteria. So it's a bacterial disease. Vibrio cholera is a bacteria, right? So have all of you written it down? Any doubts with cholera? Cholera was an epidemic, you know, it was an epidemic in India several years back where, you know, thousands and lakhs of people had died just because of this mere loose motions, cholera. Can you believe it? And it is communicable, it's a communicable disease from one person to the other person to the other, you know, it spread. So all the family members got it. Now the way that we are, you know, scared about corona, like it's a pandemic, similarly, even cholera used to be epidemic. There was a wave of this disease which came and stayed for almost a year in India, and it was very scary because in those days, 50, 60 years back, hygiene was not as we do it right now.
Ma'am, corona, I mean, like this current situation of the pandemic, was it like that?
Yes, it was. And just imagine now we are still very well equipped. We are better aware of things. We have a lot of solutions. But in those days, the medical, you know, advancement was not that great. So they really did not know what to do. It was actually an epidemic. Bhavya, share about typhoid. Let's do this quickly.
I don't know much about typhoid, but it's actually ma'am, can I explain about what's there in whatever I typed? Can I explain that? I mean,
Yeah,
my
so
own.
explain. So it is basically caused by a bacteria called Salmonella typhi.
Typhi. Ma'am, it's a bacteria in the same genus that causes that salmonella food poisoning.
Correct. Good. Yes.
Ma'am, and typhoid, I guess.
What happens actually in typhoid?
Um,
Have you heard of anybody amongst your known ones having typhoid? Because this happens even today.
no, ma'am, I don't know. But if we get typhoid, then basically it is spread due to contact with infected people's feces. Uh, Basically, this makes it very common in countries where there is really poor sanitation, where the human way can like find its way into the sources of drinking water and food chain.
Correct. So basically, it spreads through food and water then. Correct?
Yes, ma'am. And
And
the
this is
second,
actually, this is actually when a human feces get into food or water, that is when somebody gets typhoid. So can you just imagine, this is like really bad. When
yes, ma'am.
somebody has had typhoid, that means the person actually ingested feces, human feces, either
Yes,
through
ma'am.
food or through water contaminated.
Yes, ma'am. And if it is caught early, the typhoid symptoms they will usually be mild and clear up within 2 weeks. Anyway, however, without the treatment, roughly only in 5 cases of typhoid it is fatal, while those surviving may have permanent physical or mental disability.
Correct. Correct. So basically, is there a medicine for typhoid? No. There's
No.
no medication. But, how can we prevent it? Through proper hygiene. But is there
Yes,
a
ma'am.
vaccine? Yes, there is a
Yes, ma'am.
vaccine.
There,
All of,
there is a vaccine. It,
all of you have taken vaccines for typhoid, right?
yes,
So which
ma'am.
has to be taken in the beginning every year, and then after 5 years, and then after 10 years. Why? What is the vaccine? So live Salmonella typhi were actually injected into your body so that next time you eat out in a very really bad place and a real Salmonella typhi enters your body, so certain strains are already there in your body, so both of them will fight. So this is the vaccine which is there in your body, right? Dead Salmonella typhi or whatever in neutral positions, and this is a live which came through your food when you grew up. So both of them will fight, and obviously your vaccine will win. Vaccine germs will win, so you will not get typhoid. But however, saying this, there are people who, in spite of getting vaccinated, can get typhoid because if too many of these salmonella strains get in, or if these salmonella are very powerful, because the strains keep changing. You might have had the last salmonella vaccine 10 years back, right? So you always have to be clear about what you eat, where you eat. Okay, next, polio by Priscilla.
Polio is caused by poliomyelitis.
Poliomyelitis, okay.
Ma'am, it is spread through feces of an infected person.
Hmm.
Or that, it spreads to that way, ma'am. And
Mm-hmm.
what happens is that parts of your body it's like they stop moving. You can't feel
Correct.
or touch, or you can't move it or control it.
Correct. Correct.
So there aren't any any
See, there are.
treatments, but they do
Hmm.
physical therapy.
Correct. So basically, have you seen people suffering from polio? Have you ever seen?
Yes, ma'am.
So what happened? What is it? How can you make out that this person has got polio?
Ma'am, like their leg or hand is more
Correct.
shorter, and
Correct.
it's
So
not.
either of their limb is a little disfigured or a little shorter. And the way they walk is a little crooked, as in, they walk a little. Uh, so if a limb is shorter, that is how they walk. Is there a treatment? Not really. What is the solution? There is a vaccine. Right, India has worked very aggressively on polio, and we can actually claim that our country is almost a polio-free country. Right, almost every year the government goes to schools, villages, houses, and they put these polio drops to children and to little infants also. So this is what it is. So what happens is that there are no symptoms. Nobody can make out that a stomach ache or a fever or nothing. But this, if once the germs get in through food and water, the person will slowly and gradually get paralysis. That is when one of the limbs or both the limbs might get affected. This happens over a period of a few years. So you have to be extremely cautious of food and water. Because this germ poliomyelitis is a slow killer. It doesn't affect immediately like typhoid and cholera did, like loose motions, headache, fever, nothing. Just slowly and slowly the person will get paralytic. Okay? All right.
Children mostly get polio, right?
Yeah, children get polio, as in polio, one gets polio normally at childhood.
Ma'am, why like that?
Because, you know, that is when they must have come in contact, because, you know, when they were infants, when they were toddlers, they must have picked up something and put into your mouth. Okay, next coming to meningitis. Meningitis, Unmana?
Ma'am, meningitis is a disease where the membranes covering the brain and the spinal cord causes swelling, and meningitis is also caused by injuries or cancer or certain infections, and meningitis is caused by a bacteria named Streptococcus pneumonia, and it mainly happens in infants and young children and the adults.
Correct. So basically, you know, meningitis is not age dependent, right? This can happen to anyone, anybody, anytime, right? Okay, one thing, you know, polio, you know, the germs, there are high chances of spreading through soil. That's the reason why, you know, children have it more. Let me tell you. Elders, you know, the exposure to soil is less because they don't crawl, they're always walking. Children, when they're crawling, they're exposed, no? They put the same hand into their mouth. Whereas others are mainly water and airborne and food related, but this is soil related. That's why children have it at that tender age. Right? Now, what is meninges basically? You know what is meninges? Meninges is basically a part of our brain and the spinal cord, right? So for example, if this is the brain, right? So there is a membrane kind of a thing in the brain which is known as the meninges. So when this bacteria attacks, you know, it goes into our bloodstream. You know what happens? The meninges swells up. There's a lot of swelling. There's a lot of inflammation in the brain. Right? It affects the nervous system. If your brain is affected, you know, as in the computer of your body is affected, everything gets affected, isn't it? So basically, it is the inflammation of the meninges. Inflammation means swelling, right? So there is high fever, your head will pain, immediate hospitalization needs to be done in case of meningitis, right? So your nervous system will not work properly because your brain has got affected, right? And meningitis also has got, of course, it has got medication, it has got because a bacteria attacks it. So there has to be a high level of antibiotics, very high level of antibiotic injectable form that needs to be given to the patient. But most of the time, you know, by the time the doctor diagnoses that it is meningitis, the damage is already done. Yes, it is very deadly. And if it happens to elderly people, I know somebody who was very close to me, you know, in his late 60s, he had meningitis and he could not, you know, he succumbed to it. He could not survive. Everything is related to clean air and water, right? So even in today's...
Now searching in the net about meningitis, and then I saw this big cup. It was written that a 4-year-old defeats meningitis.
Yes. So basically, you know, defeats meningitis. Okay, that's good, you know, because if it is diagnosed that it is meningitis, because the symptoms are the same. Fever, you know, cold, inflammation, headache. So what does the doctor understand? Is it dengue? Is it corona? Is it meningitis? Is it typhoid? What is it? So, you know, it is difficult to narrow down and then give a proper medication. Of course, there is a vaccine also, but not for all strains. There, Streptococcus is the parent bacteria. There are many strains to it. Pneumonia is just one of them. There are many strains to it. So the vaccine will only work on a few, not on all. So it depends which strain is getting into our body. Correct?
Ma'am,
Yes.
is this the same virus which causes pneumonia?
Yes. Streptococcus pneumonia. Streptococcus is a very commonly found bacteria, especially in India. It also causes a lot of, respiratory tract related issues.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, please, what is it? Tell me.
Ma'am, there are like, ma'am, there are 5 types of hepatitis, ma'am.
Correct.
And it is named after the virus is named on the disease itself. So, so they named it as A, B, C, D, E. So hepatitis A or hepatitis B. So it spreads through contaminated food and water. And there is.
Okay. Hepato means liver. And itis. What is the meaning of itis? Anything which ends with itis means inflammation, swelling of that place. Sinusitis, hepatitis, meningitis.
Ma'am, can you tell about hepatitis?
Yeah, tell me.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, so hepatitis B, it's a serious liver infection which is caused by the hepatitis B virus that's easily preventable by a vaccine. So it has a vaccine, ma'am. But hepatitis C, it is an infection which is caused by a virus that attacks the liver and leads to inflammation. And alcoholic, it's written in
No, that's not required. We are just discussing what is it that comes from water and food, especially water, right? Now, this is caused by a virus. And let me just tell you, there are certain diseases which are caused by bacteria. There are certain diseases which are caused by virus. And there are certain fungal diseases as well, caused by fungus, right? Bacterial disease and fungal disease are still manageable. They have medications. But when it comes to virus, trust me, it is very, very difficult. There is no medicines for viral diseases, out of which COVID is also a viral disease. Right? Similarly, hepatitis is also caused due to a virus. Thus, it does not have any medicine. It does not have any treatment. We just have a vaccine for it. But again, it's the same thing. The vaccines do not work on all the strains of hepatitis. Right? So one needs to find out what kind of hepatitis is it. Is it hepatitis B or hepatitis D? That also is a long process. And once you find out, then the only solution for this is rest, bed rest, and very bland food. That's the only solution for hepatitis. Complete rest, because if the person is lying down, is in complete rest, only then the liver is in a resting position. If you stand, if you sit, the liver is in a hanging position, so it does not get enough rest.
Dysentery is caused by the
we call it dysentery. We call it dysentery.
Okay, dysentery is the bacteria scientific name is Shigellosis. It is caused by poor sanitation or hygiene. Like suppose when a person doesn't wash his hands after going to the washroom.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. That's all I got.
Okay. So basically, this also is caused by a bacteria. So if it is caused by a bacteria, it has a proper medication, right? And the name of the germ is Shigella. Shigella is again a group of bacteria. There are many strains, right? It could be either a bacteria, it could also be an amoeba. Amoeba, you find it in dirty water bodies. So if it could be amoebic dysentery, it could be a bacterial dysentery. It depends.
Ma'am, can you tell about dysentery?
Yes, it is highly food and waterborne. Obviously, if that contaminated water is used to cook food, obviously it will come to the food.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I mean like the definition of dysentery. Dysentery.
Yeah, tell me.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, dysentery is an intestinal inflammation primarily of the colon. It can lead to mild or severe stomach cramps and severe diarrhea with mucus or blood in the feces.
Correct.
Without adequate hydration, it can be fatal. Infection with the Shigella bacillus or bacterium.
Correct.
Is the most common cause.
Correct. Thank you, Bhavya. So basically, Solution for this is also ORS. Yes, Priscilla.
Ma'am, then while cooking we boil the water, no ma'am, so it should die, right?
It will die, but then again, if the the strain is strong enough, again there would be certain amount of eggs of that bacteria, certain what do you call it, certain remains, remnants, certain remnants which will stay back, and they are like really really strong or aggressive enough. Once the food cools off, it will again